Before I hand us over to Minister Imbert, I'd like to just take up on a conversation that was begun, I believe, 2 days ago when the Honorable Prime Minister addressed the JCC and gave quite a telling speech where some of the issues he addressed are issues that have been brought to us by the contractors and the construction industry. One of the main announcements that the Prime Minister made at that time was he said he was re-establishing a committee for the construction sector. And this is a ministerial committee. And he also said at that time he would be inviting members to be nominated or persons to be nominated by the JCC to sit with some ministers on this committee. The vision of this committee is it's intended to facilitate a continuous communication between the relevant stakeholders in the construction sector and the government, and at this time in particular to deal with the issue, I guess, of claims being raised by the various contractors as to sums of money owing, etc. So today the Cabinet has approved and confirmed the following committee, which will be the Committee on the Construction Sector. It will be chaired, as the Prime Minister told you all on Tuesday, by the Honourable Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley. The Deputy Chairman will be me, the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister and Minister in the Office of the Attorney General. Senator, the Honourable Rohan Sinanan, Minister of Works and Transport. The Honourable Camille Robinson-Regis, Minister of Planning and Development. The Honourable Randall Mitchell, Minister of Housing. Senator the Honourable Clarence Rambarat, Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. Senator the Honourable Kazim Hussain, Minister of Rural Development and Local Government. Senator the Honourable Alison West, Minister in the Ministry of Finance. And we will invite the Joint Consultative Council for the Construction Industry to nominate 2 to 4 representatives. We expect to sit as a committee within the next couple of weeks, the inaugural meeting. And at that meeting, what we will be asking to be done is a preparation, a compendium of all of the various claims being made by the various members of the JCC for us to take a look at. And it will set out what the contract date was, the award of the contract, any variations, sums of money is paid to date, sums of money they claim outstanding, and sums of money to completion, the percentage of completion, etc. Those are some of the examples of the information that we'll be seeking. And the government of Trinidad and Tobago, utilizing this committee, will be ensuring a proper validation of any claims being made, which is in keeping with the commitment of what we've been doing over the last 2-year period that we've been in office, which is to ensure that there's proper value for money and examination of contracts. And you all are aware of some of the instances that we found, and the Prime Minister highlighted some of them, where even though there's been a certification of works, we have found that those works have not in fact been done. So in protecting the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, we will continue with this work at this level, looking at these various claims and then push them down to where they need to be pushed down to ensure that every cent spent by this government is a value for money spent, especially in the current time. And having announced that committee, I'll now pass us over to Minister Imbert to tell us about the ferry that we've recently procured and obtained on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Young. Members of the media, it's my job today to give some information with respect to the history of the various attempts at procurement of vessels for the inter-island route over the last several years, and the current situation with respect to the acquisition of a new vessel for that route. Based on my information, in 2014, there was a selective tender issued by the Port Authority for a roll-on, roll-off cargo vessel on a 6-month charter hire. And it was sent out on a selective basis to 5 brokers, and I'll give you the names: Ferrando and Masoni, East Coast Marine Brokers, Algo Ship Brokers, Maritime Workers Offshore Contractors, Windward Ferries. 2 submissions came in, one from Maritime Workers Offshore Contractors and one from Windward Ferries. This will be January 2014. Tenders closed February 2014. The outcome of the tender was cancelled. So that was under the previous administration. That was an attempt made 4 years ago, and that ended in failure. Tender was cancelled. Again, in February 2014, another selective tender was attempted with some different brokers and some of the original group. The brokers selected, now this is selected, it wasn't open, were Ferrando and Masoni, Algo Ship Brokers, Al Ship Hamburg, East Coast Marine Brokers, Auckland Ship Brokers, Windward Ferries, Maritime Workers Offshore Contractors, Atlantic Marine Equipment, and ND Alfonso and Company. And the result of that process, there were submissions coming in from Ferrando and Masoni, ND Alfonso and Intercontinental Shipping, and Windward Ferries. ND Alfonso and Intercontinental Shipping were one together. And the result of that was that a contract was entered into between the government and Intercontinental Shipping for the cargo vessel Superfast Galicia. We come now to, and that would have been for a 6-month charter from February 2014. So that would have ended in and around August or September 2014. In December 2014, again under the previous administration, there was a public tender for the roll-on, roll-off cargo vessel on a 2-year charter hire lease basis. And on the 30th of April 2015, this would be about 5 months later, under the previous administration, tender process was discontinued, was scrapped, so that instead of the Galicia being leased on a 6-month charter basis, which would have ended around September 2014, the leasing of the Galicia continued. Just a minute, you could turn that off for me, please. Just press the button at the side. It's okay. It's all right, just leave it. Then, with the new administration, in February 2016, there was a tender put out for a replacement passenger cargo ro-ro vessel by the board of the Port Authority under the current government. It was a public tender, it was not selective. There were submissions by Treasure Queen Tours, A&V Drilling, Windward Ferries, Intercontinental Shipping. This tender process was cancelled due to, my documents tell me, weaknesses in the specifications. Then again, July 2016, there was a tender for a charter or purchase of a cargo and passenger vessel, and 2 brokers were invited to tender: Horizon Ship Brokers, Thurlston Shipping, 3 actually, and Clarkson's Plateau Shipbroking. And then through the public process, Damon Shipyards, Intercontinental Shipping, Gulf Maritime, Rima Limited, Treasure Queen Tours, Windward Ferries, Autoplanet Japan, Sunstone submitted tenders, and again the tender was cancelled. Now, the reason why the tenders were cancelled in the first and second attempt by the Port Authority under this government, what I'm told is that suitable vessels were not found to be available. There was something wrong with the vessels from one perspective or another. Either they were too old, or they did not have adequate capacity, or they were too expensive, or they consumed too much fuel, but the vessels did not meet the specifications in terms of the capacity, in terms of fuel consumption, in terms of the time to get to Tobago, in terms of the age of the vessel, and so on. So in 2017, in April 2017, there was a selective tender sent out to the following: Damon Shipyard, Clarkson Shipbroking, SC Brokerage, Gibson Shipbrokers, Bremer, ACM Shipbroking, Incat, Intercontinental Shipping, Anderson Hughes, Austral Market Price, Galbraith International, BRS Group Shipbrokers, Exeno Yamazu Corporation, IBS Global Limited. Now these are all well-established, internationally recognized ship brokers, so that if I look at the numbers, I think I'm seeing either 12 or 13 internationally recognized ship brokers were invited by the Port Authority in April 2017 to submit proposals for the supply of a cargo roll-on, roll-off ferry on a 3-year time charter basis. Only one submission was received. So 13 international brokers were invited to submit proposals for the supply of a cargo roll-on, roll-off ferry vessel for the Port Authority in April 2017. They got one submission, and it was determined that it was not appropriate to proceed with simply one submission when you're going to lease the vessel. And I thought that that appeared to be consistent with best practice. So that was cancelled because there was no interest. So 13 international brokers were invited, only one submitted. And the submission was not in keeping with the specifications. Then in August 2017, there was a public tender for the supply of a roll-on, roll-off passenger vessel for 2 years, and it was by way of public tender, and 5 entities made submissions: Getaway Cruises, Ocean Star Shipping, Bridgeman Services, Paragon Protection Consultants, Sea Jets Maritime Company. The process was cancelled because none of the submissions were acceptable in terms of fuel consumption, cost, and capacity, and specifications, and so on. So after this very long process, if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 attempts by the Port Authority under 2 different administrations, the one that struck me as the most striking was when 13 international brokers were invited, and you can see the names. Damon Shipyard is the company that constructed and supplied the military vessels that we are currently using now. So these are not inexperienced ship brokers. All of the others are well known in the international world. Intercontinental, for example, is the broker that supplied the Galicia. But only one. You invite 13 of the top brokers in the world, you get one. And when you get the one, the vessels that were proposed were not suitable. So after 7 attempts by the Port Authority over a 3-year period, the Cabinet decided that it was appropriate to appoint a committee to do a worldwide search for a vessel. The members of the committee were myself, as Minister of Finance, the Minister in the Ministry of the Prime Minister, Office of the Prime Minister, Minister of Tourism, and the Minister of Public Utilities. And the committee prepared a short list of 10 brokers from more or less from among that list I just called out there, among the 13. 10 internationally reputable shipbrokers and ship charterers, and invited these internationally recognized shipbrokers to submit proposals for a vessel. And we were very flexible in our approach. If we came upon a vessel that was suitable for purchase, then we would make recommendations with respect to purchase. If we came across a vessel that was suitable for leasing, we would make recommendations with respect to leasing. We also wrote, I on behalf of the committee, wrote to the 4 foreign embassies seeking their assistance. We wrote to the Canadian High Commission, the Australian High Commission, the Japanese Embassy, and I believe the Italian Embassy, Italian Consulate, with respect to assisting us, because these are countries that have experience in the manufacture and supply of ferries. Canada, Italy, Japan, Australia. These are countries that are well known for having experience and expertise in this area, so that we wrote to these 4 foreign embassies, and we also invited 10 of these reputable shipbrokers to propose vessels. And let me make it clear, the function and purpose of the committee was simply to identify potential vessels that might be suitable for acquisition. The committee did not have the mandate to go and procure anything. It was simply to do a worldwide search to identify potential vessels that might be suitable. During the course of inquiries, using this process, the committee became aware of a brand new ferry which is located in China. It is at the Nansha shipyard in Guangzhou, Guangdong, China. And we became aware of this vessel because one of the shipbrokers put out inquiries to all of its customers and its affiliates. And one of its affiliates, an entity called Sea Transport Corporation of Australia, was in the process of constructing a passenger ferry for a customer in Venezuela. And that particular customer operates a ferry service between the mainland of Venezuela and the various islands off of Venezuela. You have Margarita and so on, these islands off of Venezuela. The vessel, when we looked at the specifications, they were reasonably close to the specifications that all of these attempts over the years had been looking at. So the committee's first instinct was, let's take another look at this vessel because it's brand new. The vessel was being built, for, as I said, for a Venezuelan company, a Venezuelan ferry operator, who had been unable to complete the purchase because of the economic situation in Venezuela. When you purchase a vessel, you make progress payments, similar to when you are building a house. You would make payments along the way, or you have a construction project. As the work advances and a valuation is put on the work, you make progress payments. So when you're buying a new build vessel from scratch, the purchaser would make a down payment, and then as the hull is cut, another payment. As the deck is put on, another payment. As the engines are put in, another payment. As the propellers are put in, as the electronics are put in, plumbing and all that sort of thing is put into the vessel. Progress payments are made. And this particular company was unable to complete the purchase. They had reached almost to the end, but they could not complete the purchase because of their economic circumstances, and therefore were unable to finish the acquisition of the boat. So the boat now became the property of the company that was organizing the construction of the vessel in China. So it's Sea Transport is the owner who organized to have the vessel constructed at this shipyard in China. So, when it came to our attention, we were told that the vessel construction is completed. It had been completed by sheer circumstance, maybe a couple days before the inquiry went out to all the international ship brokers. You could call it happenstance, you could use whatever word you want to describe that. But it just so happened that a couple days before we put out the inquiry to all the ship brokers and through the embassies and so on, the construction of this vessel was completed. And it was in the process of what is called snagging, so that the builders were going through the process with the shipyard, the owners going through the process with the builders to deal with what they call minor defects. So there might be a light might not be working in the captain's cabin. There might be some issue with one of the generators or something like that. When these projects are completed, there'll be an inspection and then there'll be a snagging list of defects. So the construction had been done, the vessel had gone through its sea trials and was ready for handover, but the snagging list had to be completed before final delivery. And we arrived on the scene just a couple of days later. So I would call it happenstance. So when we looked at the vessel, we determined the vessel is a double hull aluminum vessel, a catamaran. It's a aluminum superstructure and steel hull design. It's 74 meters in length. It has a draft of 2.75 meters, which means that it can berth anywhere in the Port of Spain harbor. It can berth at Queen's Wharf, it can berth at the ferry terminal, and it can berth anywhere in the port, because there is nowhere in the port that is less than 5 to 6 meters draft. So this vessel has a draft of 2.75 meters. So it can easily berth at the existing ferry terminal without any requirement for dredging or anything like that, any additional expense. The vessel can accommodate 700 passengers, 100 vehicles. The cost was shown to us to be $17.4 million US dollars, and I must tell you that, like some members of the public, we found the price very attractive. You know, we wondered about the price, but the fact of the matter is that it was essentially a distress sale, and that was the price that it was offered to us. And we have conducted valuations on this vessel, and we are satisfied that the price of 17.4 million US is a fair and reasonable market price. In fact, it's a good price. So there's no question that the government of Trinidad and Tobago would be paying more than they should for this vessel. Over the month of December, the committee felt that we should not rely on any inspection reports or any sea trials that had been done previously for the previous purchaser or by anybody associated with the vessel previously. We felt that we should be very, very, very careful about this, so that Lloyd's Register of Hong Kong was commissioned to do an inspection of the vessel. We also commissioned expert marine consultants out of Australia, a company by the name of Schulte Marine, to be a second independent pair of eyes for the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And we took a third precaution of engaging maritime experts from the University of Trinidad and Tobago Maritime Campus. We have master mariners here and experts in sea transportation who are lecturers at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. So we took a third precaution of engaging expert master mariners from the University of Trinidad and Tobago to go to China, and together with Lloyd's Register of Hong Kong and our Australian consulting firm,
attend the sea trials and inspect the vessel. So we now have 3 inspection reports. One from Lloyd's Register Hong Kong, one from Schulte Marine, and one from our experts at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. And these 3 reports have satisfied us that this vessel is a potential vessel, this is the committee I'm talking about, satisfied the committee that this vessel was worthy of consideration. So, having done all of that, we then engaged expert counsel from the United Kingdom. We decided to make sure that whatever we did would be legally correct, would be commercially correct, and would be in the best interest of the population of Trinidad and Tobago. So we engaged the services of an expert firm in the United Kingdom by the name of Haynes and Boons, and within that firm there's quite a bit of expertise among the lawyers in that firm with respect to ship acquisition and ship purchase. And the lawyer, in fact, that was assigned to this particular acquisition has done 20 such ship acquisitions in the region of China within the last couple of years. So we didn't spare any focus with respect to that. So the UK lawyer examined everything, prepared draft documents and so on. And once the committee was completely satisfied that this vessel was worthy of consideration, we have handed over the entire process to the National Infrastructure Development Company to complete the transaction using its procurement process. But NIDCO will now have the benefit, or now has the benefit, of 3 inspection reports from experts, 2 valuations from experts, and the services of an internationally recognized maritime lawyer. So that's it in a nutshell. But I want to say a few things. This vessel is intended to complement the 2 existing fast ferries that we have. So there will in fact be 3 vessels on the route. Currently, the TNT Spirit is being refurbished at dry dock in Chagaramas. We are hopeful that that will be back in service next month. As soon as the TNT Spirit comes back in, there will be overlap with the TNT Express. As soon as it's appropriate, the Express will go for its dry docking and its repairs and so on. And this vessel is expected to leave China en route to Trinidad again next month. It will take approximately 2 months to get here, so that we expect it will arrive sometime at the beginning of April. That's my guess, that this vessel will arrive if all goes well, if it does not encounter any problems along the way. And when this vessel is here, and both the Spirit and the Express have completed their refurbishment, their overhaul, their maintenance and so on, we will have 3 vessels on the route. And what is particularly attractive about this vessel that the government is proposing to acquire is the fact that it is perfect for the Toco to Tobago ferry route. It will make that journey in 1 hour. So we're now building the capacity to establish a ferry service from Toco to Tobago, and the National Infrastructure Development Company has now been given an assignment to develop the capability. They already run the water taxi service. They've been running the water taxi service, if my memory is right. We launched that service in 2008, if I remember correctly. So that they've been running the water taxi service now for more than 9 years. This is NIDCO. And they ran that service from scratch, so that they have developed a capacity within NIDCO for ship operations and ship maintenance and ship scheduling and repairs and that sort of thing. So we are now tasking NIDCO to develop a further capacity, to develop the capability to operate this vessel, which will be then leased to the Port Authority by NIDCO, in the same way that if it was being offered by the private sector, it would be leased to the Port Authority. And NIDCO will also now not just develop the capacity to operate and maintain this vessel, but also to manage the marine operations for the Toco to Tobago port situation in the future. So that I noticed all sorts of comments in the papers, some of which I quite frankly don't understand. But I'm laying the facts out as they are here, that this will be the third vessel on the route. We are building capacity, and one of the reasons why we are building capacity into the route, or adding capacity to the route, is that one of the problems we've had as a country over the years is that all of these vessels require mandatory dry docking and servicing on scheduled time, at scheduled times. And unfortunately, because we had two boats, whenever one went in for its mandatory dry docking, because if you don't dry dock the vessel loses what is called its passenger safety certificate. When you're traveling between one mass of land and another across open seas, you must have something called a passenger safety certificate. This is issued by our local Maritime Services Division. That's part of our maritime law in Trinidad and Tobago. And if your vessel does not have a passenger safety certificate, you can't transport passengers on it. So that dry docking is part of the process of renewing your passenger safety certificate, because it's not absolute. It has a period, 2 years or 3 years or 1 year, as the case may be. So what has happened over the years with the two ferries is that as one has to go in for dry docking and it's A check, C check, whatever, like just like a plane, you only have one boat. So that it has caused a tremendous strain on the one boat that remains, because the single boat is now doing double duty, and it is being put under tremendous pressure. Having 3 vessels on the Port of Spain to Scarborough route will now allow the government the ability to maintain and fulfill a proper, reasonable and planned maintenance and repair schedule for the vessels. So you would always have 2 vessels running at any given time. One could be in its dry dock, could be being overhauled and so on. And when all 3 are operational, you would have 3 vessels, which would be very useful at seasonal peak times like Christmas and Easter and the Tobago Jazz Festival and so on. And these times when you have this tremendous demand for marine transportation between Trinidad and Tobago. So that explains why we're acquiring this vessel. It's brand new. It's not leased. It will be owned by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The life cycle cost of this vessel over a period, let's say, of 10 years would be far less than if we were paying $25,000 a day to rent a ferry, which is what you have to do. If you lease a ferry, you're going to have to pay $25,000 a day. If you multiply that, just do the maths yourself. $25,000 a day by, say, 30 days for the month is $750,000 a month. Multiply that by 12, you're coming out at over $8 million, maybe close to 9. And do the math, you're talking about over $50 million, 50 million TT dollars in rental costs is what you're paying for those leased vessels per year. This vessel, the cost of this vessel will be covered in 2 years. And from year 3, there's no cost of acquisition of this vessel compared to a leased vessel. So the persons who are clamoring for the government to go and lease a vessel clearly have not done the math and have not done the economics. When you look at the tremendous costs of leasing a passenger ferry at $25,000 a day, you're far better off if you get a vessel like this for about 115 million Trinidad dollars. As I said, the lease cost of a passenger ferry is over $50 million, close to $60 million a year. So that in 2 years you cover the cost and you now own the vessel, you're now in control, you're now master of your own domain, and of course it's far cheaper. One of the things about this vessel as well is that its fuel consumption, it's very economical to run. The engines, again, this is pure happenstance. The engines in this particular vessel are the identical engines that are in the water taxis. It's a model called MTU, and it comes from Germany. And I wish to say that even though this vessel is constructed in China, many of the components are top-of-the-line European designs, such as the engine, which are MTU, and all of the other equipment manufacturers like Cummins and Perkins and so on, that those in the marine field would be familiar with. I also saw some mention of vessels being offered to the committee, and one particular vessel has made the papers, and I am familiar with this vessel. Or we are familiar, let me use we. We have been offered this vessel by 7 different people, the same boat. And that was one of the problems that the Port Authority found itself in, that persons purport to represent the owners of vessels, but they're not really representing them. They go on the internet, they see a vessel is available, they make representation to the Port Authority that they act on behalf of the owner of the vessel, when in fact their plan is to go and buy it, and that has happened. Or their plan is as soon as they get the contract from the government, they will then go and contact the owners and say, oh, by the way, we put in a bid for your boat, and we won the bid, and we'd now like to enter into arrangements with you. So on many occasions when boats are offered, the person offering the boat is not the owner of the boat, is not the authorized agent of the owner, is not the authorized representative. So that particular boat that is in the papers was offered to us by 7 different people, by registered mail, by email, by letter, by WhatsApp, by 7 different people, the same boat. And I just would like to say something about that boat. That boat is 17 years old, 17. And one of the problems with fast ferries is that as they approach the 20-year life interval, there are all sorts of issues with a fast ferry. Once it crosses 10 years and goes past 15 and it heads towards 20, there are all sorts of issues. And we see that with our own boat. We own, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, own 2 ferries, the TNT Express and the TNT Spirit. The Spirit is 13 years old, and the Express is 20 years old. And the Express is really at the end of its useful life. It really has become very, very expensive and very difficult to maintain that vessel. So that this was not one, there were a number of unsolicited offers to us to lease this boat, the 17-year-old boat, which my information tells me has been in military service in the East and is not in a condition for immediate delivery and immediate use on the inter-island route. So this boat had 2 problems. It had 7 owners, 7 different owners, and it is not in a condition where it would be able to obtain a passenger safety certificate immediately, because it's been in military use and it's now been decommissioned by the military over in the Middle East, I believe, and or further east, and it now would have to be overhauled, dry docked, refurbished, and so on before it came in. So we were being offered a boat that was not even fit for purpose by 7 different people, and as I told you, the cost of these vessels is somewhere in the region of $25,000 a day. So if we had accepted that, even though that would have been a complete breach of all known procurement procedures, man, just send you a letter and say, look, my boat, take that. That would have been a complete breach of all known procurement procedures if we did it. But if we had been foolish enough to do that, we would be leasing a boat that is 17 years old, that is not ready for immediate delivery, and would cost this country $60 million a year. So that was not the mandate of the committee. The mandate of the committee is not to receive unsolicited bids from bidders who don't own the boat, and if they don't get a response from us, they go and put it in the papers. That was not our mandate, not to receive unsolicited bids from people who of questionable origins. Our mandate was to identify potential vessels that were suitable, and we were very, very fortunate as a country. Just as the time we put out our inquiries to all of these shipbrokers and these foreign countries, that this vessel just became available because the original buyer was unable to complete the purchase. And I think I have gone into as much detail as I possibly can. I notice Minister Young on the side of me. I will now answer any questions that you may have about this.
We'll take some questions. Kamal?
When you addressed the Parliament, you also made a comparison between what they expressed of spirit would have cost as a
Yes.
vessel. So there's obviously a reason why some people may be skeptical. Is it that the shipbuilding...
We're not comparing, in the first instance, we're not comparing apples and apples. This is a slightly smaller vessel, just slightly. The fast ferries are 94 meters, this is 74 meters. The fast ferries carry 900 passengers and about 180 cars. This carries 700 passengers and 100 cars. But be that as it may, it is still a very good price. When you compare apples and apples and you strip it all down to on an occupancy basis on how many people it can accommodate and how many cars it can accommodate, and you do the math, it is a very good price.
Because there have been payments already made, that it really just wanted to recover the remainder of the...
I can't speak for them, but I don't even think that's important. I think what's important is that we were very fortunate to find a brand new vessel, never used, because I've seen all sorts of stories about how this boat was in storage. I've read that somewhere, that there was a boat in storage for a couple of years, you know, just rusting away, and then we decided to buy this old boat that nobody wanted. Not true. The construction of the boat was completed 2 days before we went out for our search. And you may be absolutely right that that because of the way the commercial arrangements are, the builder and so on, they already received some payments from the previous owner, and they may now just want to recover, you know, their outlay and that sort of thing. I could only speculate on that.
And on the topic of speculation, just to add, we had seen last week speculation by one of the newspapers that we were purchasing a vessel from Singapore with a helicopter pad and all of these types of things, and it was really a passenger cruise ship type of vessel. We just like to caution as a government, because we know there are a lot of mischief makers out there who are trying to feed stories, to just do some diligence on those stories, because as you've now been told comprehensively by Minister Imbert, and he has the documentation in support, there was absolutely no truth to that whatsoever. But in order for us to protect the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, it was just one day too premature for us to say anything, because he's listed from 2014 come forward all of the difficulties we faced as a nation in successfully procuring a proper vessel. And we have finally done that. But at that time, we could not give the information. So these mischief makers, in particular, some former cabinet members who this would have fallen under their purview at the time, they really should not try to continue misleading the population.
No, hold on, Ms. Tate. I'll come to you in a very short while. Minister Young has reminded me of something. I saw some articles in one of the newspapers over the weekend that it is the norm to lease passenger ferries in Trinidad and Tobago. And that was actually published in an article and then found its way into commentary within the paper. And I was a little taken aback, because everybody in Trinidad and Tobago knows that the government purchased the TNT Express and purchased the TNT Spirit and purchased the MV Panorama and the other boats before that. I don't know if any of you are young enough to have traveled on the Scarlet Ibis, but I did. So that all those years before, the practice and the norm and the precedent was to purchase passenger ferries. The government is not in the practice of leasing passenger ferries, but I saw an article which fed into commentary that the practice is to lease So why on earth is the government breaking this long-established practice? It's not true. And buying a vessel. We don't buy vessels in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is the kind of mischief we in the government have had to contend with. Totally inaccurate and erroneous information.
Government is confident that it is not purchasing a lemon, because the suspicion is that something is wrong with this vessel, why it is being obtained at this very...
Well, Ms. Tate, that just demonstrates the cynicism within certain quarters in Trinidad and Tobago society. Because if we had announced the price of the boat at 50 million US, they will say, you're spending too much. So that if you pay too much, you lose. If you pay what appears to be too little, you lose. The reason why we were unable to make any public statement with details previously was because we were being very, very careful. So that is why we engaged Lloyd's of Hong Kong. Lloyd's is one of the 2 top classification societies in the world, and I'll explain what a classification society is. Vessels are required to be in class in order to perform certain functions. So you have classes of vessels, like an oil tanker is of a particular class. A passenger ferry is of a particular class. Excuse me. A cargo vessel is of a particular class, and so on. These vessels have to be classified. And it's done by either Det Nordke Veritas, which is DNV, or Lloyd's of London, which has offices all over the world. And we were very careful. The first thing we did is we engaged Lloyd's, because Lloyd's was resident at the shipyard in Hong Kong, in China, sorry. So you say, fine, let's use Lloyd's, one of the big 2 in the world. And then we decided that wasn't enough. So we got an expert marine consulting firm out of Australia to do a second inspection for us. And then we decided even that wasn't enough. Let's send people here from Trinidad and Tobago. So we sent maritime experts from the University of Trinidad and Tobago and subjected the vessel to the most rigorous and exhaustive tests possible over a period of a month. We also did the precaution of getting independent valuations on the vessel. So we, at the level of the government or of the view, we have done as much as anybody could possibly do. In fact, some people would see it as overkill to get 3 independent inspections of a vessel and 2 independent evaluations, and to subject this. In fact, at many times during the process, the owners became very frustrated with us and said, do you want this boat or not? Because every week you're coming with a new inspection, a new examination, a new requirement, a new process. And then when we got the lawyers involved, it was the same thing, because the UK lawyers were seeking the interests of Trinidad and Tobago. So again, the owners became a little frustrated, saying, this UK lawyer is being very, very meticulous, and do you really want this boat or not? But we stuck through it. We got our valuations, we got our inspection reports as a committee, we got our UK attorney expert to give us the legal cover that we required. So we feel we have done the best that we can. All of the entities have certified the vessel as being fit for purpose and suitable for use in our waters.
As a committee, we also went one step further, Minister, but we recall, and when we were just being cautious, we also wanted someone to verify ownership of the vessel, to make sure we had proper title to the vessel, we were receiving proper title. So all of that diligence was done on this occasion as well.
That also reminds me that we have also engaged Dun & Bradstreet to do a financial and forensic check on everybody involved. The shipyard, the builder, the owner. I see you raising your eyebrows, Mr. Nanton, but the way this country is, I decided to do, sorry Joe, I don't know why, I apologize again. The way this country is, we decided, the government, this was not my decision, this was a government decision, we'll do a Dun & Bradstreet on them too. Okay?
Ms. Hassan, just 1 second, Joe.
Can you say what is the
sailing time from Trinidad to Tobago? You haven't mentioned that. And that
4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah.
June,
So is it,
sorry.
will this sailing time take longer than the TNT Express and the TNT Spirits?
That's a good question, because what we decided to do was to go and check the records and see how fast the boats have been making that trip over the last 2 years. And the average sailing time is 4 hours and 15 minutes. Now, when the boats were newer, because they were not new when we got them, but when they were newer, they were making the trip in 3 or 3.5 hours, that sort of thing, 3 hours. So that this boat is expected to make the trip in 4 hours.
June.
I'm going to just seek some clarification from the $17.5 million, the cost of the vessel. But then you are speaking about the UK lawyers and then the experts from
All of the associated costs of acquisition.
There will be other costs. It's going to cost us $800,000 to sail the vessel from China to Trinidad and Tobago. And the cost of the experts, the UTT experts, their cost was very reasonable. They just charge, well, we just had to do their airfare and accommodation, and they charge a small stipend, very reasonable stipend. And the engineering firm, I don't have those figures right now. I can tell you I was quite shocked at the invoice from the lawyer. It's very low. I really was surprised. When I saw it today, the invoice from the UK lawyer, it was quite low. So that we have done quite well.
What is the context of this kind of thing?
What I saw was £10,000.
Pay it and run.
I'm hearing Mr. Young saying that. That's probably what Trinidad lawyers charge for you to walk through their door.
Depending on the lawyer.
Depending
Any
on the
other
lawyer
questions,
says.
Clint?
I just wanted to ask about the name of this vessel, this other vessel, which was offered several different times. And
It's called the Westpac Express. WESPAC Express. Check it out. It's on Wikipedia.
this new vessel, what class of vessel is it? Is this a catamaran too, or it's something different?
I said it was a catamaran. Yeah.
Minister, is there a proposed name for this
Yes.
vessel?
The Galleon's Passage. Galleon's Passage. For those of you who know Trinidad, for those of you who know Trinidad and Tobago history, the passage between Tobago and Trinidad, historically, since the time of the Spaniards, was called the Galleon's Passage. If you go and look at an old map of Trinidad and Tobago, you will see that written there.
Jule.
Minister, you had mentioned the previous bidding rounds and some of the challenges involved. I heard the name of two companies that I'm not so, but I don't know if they are involved in shipping. A&B Drilling, I think, was one. Paragon Security, another. So is it the norm that just any company could put in a bid to, if the Port Authority is looking for a ferry or a ship for any service?
That was a public tender. So, I mean, anybody is free to submit. When the submissions come in, and that applies not just to the port, to anything. When you have a public tender, you would have certain qualifications for tenderers, but you may get a number of submissions where the persons don't have the requisite experience or qualifications or track record, and they would not qualify. But when you do a public tender, anybody can bid. So that did happen, yes. There were entities that are not known in the shipbuilding or ship leasing business who would have tendered from time to time.
Come on.
So my question, before this process, there was a lot of concern from the government about what took place before, especially with the Galicia. I think the Attorney General had said an investigation was going on to that because there was allegations of corruption. Are we at any point on that to say what has been found?
With respect to the Galicia, we have retained a senior counsel and a team of lawyers, and we are expecting, if it hasn't already happened, that they will be commencing action against the broker for the Galicia for the state that they put the country in. So the last, when I had spoken to them, we were calculating the damages that we would be entitled to. But we are pursuing legal action against the broker for the Galicia, and you would recall in April last year the quick manner within which it departed from our shores. So we are pursuing action with that. With respect to some of the other action that we took and the forensic work that we did, coming out of what we found was suspicious circumstances at the port, and you recall the Prime Minister telling the country what happened when he went before the Joint Select Committee of Parliament. Certain action was already taken. There is more action to be taken. And what we really did is we thankfully intervened at a point, and you've heard the details by Minister Imbert, and it seems as though we have saved the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago a tremendous amount of money, because when you do the calculation, and we found that the rates that were being offered to lease some of these vessels compared to the cost. So again, the point he was making, these persons who are promoting a storyline out there that vessels should be leased, maybe when we start to follow the money and take a look, we might see their names pop up there.
Question to you. The nation would soon be having its procurement regulator and so on, the new procurement
Well,
system.
they've been sworn in, correct?
In terms of operation,
Correct,
so
it's a proclamation.
construction, if you have this system that will be in place.
Yeah. Well, it's not, the subcommittee on construction has nothing to do with the procurement process. This is all post contracts being awarded, post work being performed, etc. The new procurement regulations and legislation, which are just subject to being proclaimed now, are to deal with procuring contracts and the disposal of state assets. So it has, there's absolutely no interconnection between the two.
Process before.
No, this isn't a vetting process. The construction committee is to look at the claims being made by contractors for sums of money due and owing. So as I said, it would have meant that contracts had been awarded, they had been paid for some of the work, they're not being paid, etc. And to look at it and the experience we've had over the last 2 years to ensure that proper value for money is gained.
On a slightly different topic, seeing that we...
You've gone off the boat? Well, I'd just like to make
Just
one
one sec.
parting
Yes, go
comment
on,
on the
please.
boat. After Clint, okay.
Sorry. No, sorry, Minister. Go ahead.
Let me just make one parting thing. I want to underscore the fact this will be the third vessel on the route. We will have the 2 fast ferries, 2 government-owned fast ferries operating, plus this one. So this is not intended to replace a leased fast ferry. This is a supplement to our 2 existing
addition to 2
owned.
fast ferries.
In addition to our 2 fast ferries, we'll have another ferry which allows the maintenance schedule to be properly done. I just want to underscore that.
And one of the benefits of ownership is obvious. We're not going to be held to ransom the way we were in the past, and you all have seen over the past year by owners and brokers who want to escalate prices on us for the leasing. As a 6-month comes to an end, they then tell us, well, the vessel is leaving tomorrow, etc. The citizens of Trinidad and Tobago now own these 3 vessels, and we will manage it properly through NITCO, and we will get a much better service with nobody holding a gun to our heads. Kamal?
I just have a question on you outlined the challenges that the Port Authority went through, but the process used by the Cabinet Subcommittee, I mean, I came in a little late, but you could correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't seem vastly different from what the Port would have done. So why is it that the committee was successful and the Port Authority has been so unsuccessful?
You know, Kamal, I think I got the name right now. That is an unfair question. We were given an assignment, the cabinet appointed committee was given an assignment, and it was fortunate that upon inquiry to these 10 international shipbrokers and the 4 foreign countries, that this vessel became available. To say why we were able to do that and others might not be able to do it, that's an unfair question. It just happened. We started our process and this vessel became available.
I mean, the Port Authority, is it that it does not have, I know you said you wrote to embassies and so on, but this is the Port Authority's assignment. And if it is that it was unsuccessful, shouldn't it have explored all options available through the cabinet to ensure that it was able to secure one? I think there's a concern that the port was unable to do its job. And
well, as you saw, Kamal, you did come in late. I went back to 2014 and I gave a report on seven failed attempts by the Port Authority under 2 different governments to procure a suitable vessel for the route. So it was, and there are things that you just can't leave alone, you know, because in this country, if you do something, there are persons who would criticize you for one reason or another. If you don't do something, then another whole group of people will criticize you. It would have been irresponsible of the cabinet, recognizing that there had been 7 attempts to do this under 2 separate governments, and it hadn't worked out for one reason or another, to just leave it alone, because we are a twin island state and we just can't leave the connectivity, the connection between Trinidad and Tobago, we just can't leave it there. And this is why the cabinet felt we need to get a cabinet subcommittee involved and get something done. And we were just fortunate that things have worked out the way they've worked out.
Okay, last question.
I
Clint?
just wanted to just go back to find out if the cabinet had any deliberations at all about some sort of lasting recognition for former President Richards of any kind.
That has not come up for discussion at today's cabinet. Not as yet.
Yes. One for Minister Imbert and one for me. The Prime Minister of St. Vincent has expressed his displeasure with their inability to access forex when their traders come here. One, is it that St. Vincent is the only group of traders having this particular problem, or is it a general problem of all small, well, all the other islands who come here and sell their stuff? And what solution does the government have in mind for dealing with this? Or will it allow it to go to the CCJ? And the question of the talks, the crime talks.
I saw in that newspaper report, but we've had no official communication from any authority in St. Vincent about this matter. So it's hard to comment on something that is the subject of a media report. I'd prefer, you know, there's not much I can say about it. I think I would have to wait for the official communication, and certainly the last thing I would do is to get into any public discussion on any comment made by a Caribbean Prime Minister. I'm not going to do that. So we'll wait for the official communication, if one comes, to see what is the issue. I am not sure what the issue is. If I go by that newspaper report, but as I said, I have no official communication on this. So we as a country, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has no official communication on this. It appears that there's an issue that traders from St. Vincent who sell their goods in Trinidad and Tobago are having difficulty converting TT dollars into US dollars or EC dollars, as the case may be. But so is every other citizen of Trinidad and Tobago or any other person who sells their goods in Trinidad and Tobago. Because of the decline in the price of petroleum products, but hydrocarbons, we have a foreign exchange shortage. So every person, everybody who trades with Trinidad and Tobago, whether you're trading informally as someone coming on these vessels out of St. Vincent, or whether you're coming through the airport, or whether you're a large conglomerate that is, you know, importing goods into Trinidad and Tobago, and you would want to convert TT dollars into US dollars to repatriate your profits or to recover your costs and so on, everybody would have this issue. So it is not isolated to any one country or any one person or any one entity. And because of that, because it cannot possibly be isolated to one person or one company or one country, we will have to wait until we get an official communication on this before any formal or official comment can be made. It is not possible to make a comment in the absence of official communication.
Sorry, Ria had one last question.
Yeah, the crime talks.
The letter.
What crime talks?
The crime talks on the 2 bills that the opposition...
No, they don't recategorize it. On the last occasion you all came here, the leader of the opposition had provided you all with a copy of a letter where they had highlighted 2 pieces of legislation and indicated to us that they're willing to talk. As you all know, and as I had pointed out very carefully on the last occasion, the government has always held the door open on anti-gang legislation. In fact, we've gone to Parliament twice, and I remind the country once again that it is the UNC opposition who prevented that anti-gang legislation from being current legislation, even though they are the ones who first took it to Parliament, and a PNM opposition agreed with it and supported it. The UNC took a position on 2 occasions under this administration to block that legislation in Parliament. The leader of the opposition has now written to the Prime Minister. The Attorney General is in the process of preparing a response to it. Interestingly, she also took the opportunity to raise anti-terrorism legislation, which I indicated last week we had already drafted. In fact, it came up for further discussion this morning at Cabinet. It is something that we are almost prepared to take to Cabinet, and very shortly copies of that will be passed over to the opposition. We as a government remain committed with our 23 votes to go to Parliament and do what is right for Trinidad and Tobago. It is interesting as to why all of a sudden the opposition highlighted the anti-terrorism legislation, because it wasn't on any agenda or any discussion. I suspect I know why. And if they are prepared to support it and do what is responsible as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I would be very, very happy to see that day. But we as a government doing all that is within our control. We will be responding, one, to them. We will be going to Parliament with those 2 pieces of legislation. You will recall the commitment that they have given with the anti-gang legislation, because of course the 6-month period under the standing orders has not elapsed when they failed to support it. And let's see if they're good to their word on this occasion.
This have been a priority. I mean,
And who says it's not a priority? They write a letter last week. 1 week has gone. There are a lot of things taking place. I've just told you the Attorney General is in the process of preparing the response to it.
Caveats in the letter that it is still, the opposition is still of the view that there should be a very short sunset clause, which was the major falling out the last time.
I am not quite certain as to the caveat to which you're referring. As I say, the Attorney General is preparing the response. When that response goes, I'm sure you all get a copy after it's been delivered, unlike what happens on the other side. And at that time, let's see where we go with it. Let's see if they will hold their word or find an excuse. All right, thank you all very much.